And welcome to It's Not Your Fault here on Primetime Health on Utah Valley Live and KHQN 1480 AM. Today we have our host with us, Steve Shank, and his guest for today, Barbara Rosberg with eFoods Direct and Go Foods Global. They've been partners for years and years in the food industry, and they're here today to talk about the book, It's Not Your Fault, and the sponsor, eFoods Direct. Okay, Steve's ready to start. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for coming. This is probably going to be an interesting experience for some of you that haven't seen us for the first time, or that haven't seen us before. But the name of the show is It's Not Your Fault, and the reason for that is that I spent a long time in sales in the field, and I've discovered that an awful lot of folks out there are dealing with issues that they really don't need to, and they're seeing things a little bit different than how they actually work. So as a result of getting a lot of 2x4s across the forehead, making a lot of mistakes, and finding a lot of things that were my fault, I discovered that there are ways to deal with things that are useful, and they've been proven useful in some of the sales organizations that I've run and with some of the folks that I've shared them with. I guess maybe one of the biggest issues that we have is when people look at their lives, they feel a lot of times pretty much out of control. They don't have the ability to be as happy as they'd like to. Lincoln made an interesting statement. He said, "People are about as happy as they choose to be." But right now, with that thought, let's take a little break. Folks, have you ever realized that freedom is spelled F-O-O-D? Food. After air and water, food is our greatest dependency. Taking control of that dependency ensures personal power, independence, and freedom. We can't control earthquakes, storms, martial law, dollar crash inflation, the global warming hoax, farm and garden restrictive legislation, job loss, crop failures, or the 2012 planet disruptions. However, if we have our own food, none of these can control us. Hunger can never be used to control you if you never are forced to stand in a bread line because you do not have your own bread. It seems the only freedom we still have control of is possession of food. If we don't control our own food, events are rapidly moving to use food to control us. Freedom truly is spelled F-O-O-D. Contact eFoodsDirect.com or call 800-409-5633. That's eFoodsDirect.com or 800-409-5633.
In business since 1980, RIMS has served Utah property owners and condominium associations for nearly 3 decades. Today, RIMS stands as one of Utah's largest and most reputable management firms. Whether your property is large or small, a homeowners association or an individual condominium, an apartment community or a single-family home, a student housing complex or an office or retail center, RIMS will provide all the necessary management and maintenance expertise you need to achieve your goals without sacrificing any of the personal and responsive care you expect from your property management company. Call 801-375-5595. Looking to rent a property that RIMS manages? Go to remsinc.com or call 801-375-5595.
And welcome back to It's Not Your Fault, part of the Primetime Health segment right here on KHQN 1480 AM and Utah Valley Live. With us here we have the host Steve Shank, and today his guest is Babs Rosberg, Barbara Rosberg, and she and Steve founded eFoods Direct and Go Foods Global. Now, these are companies that are food companies, storable food that's delicious and gourmet and healthy for you. They have a solution that they're going to talk about, and they're going to talk about their journey through 30 years in the food industry. Babs, of course, is also a golfer, and she is well known for her wonderful trips to the Country Music Awards and to Hawaii. So that's a fun thing that she does besides food. And, of course, Steve Shank, you're getting to know him each week right here on Tuesday on It's Not Your Fault, which is really all about your book that's coming out soon. And each week we're going to talk about how people can learn to get to know themselves a little better thanks to the great experiences that Steve Shank has had. So, Steve.
Well, the interesting thing is that in working with food supplies, Babs and I developed an understanding of what makes people tick a little bit, but you have to understand something. One of the things that people deal with in their lives is dependency, and the extent to which you're dependent is the extent to which you give power over yourself to that on which you depend. And we're in a nation that believes in freedom, we like liberty, and there are some things about us as human beings that you never want to mess with. Oddly enough, the thing that makes people most uncomfortable is if you take away their freedom to choose. In other words, if they're forced to be dependent, if they're forced to be obedient to something that they haven't necessarily chosen. My dad, I refer to him as Daddy because he was a pretty wise old duck, and he used to say, the mind that's changed against its will is of the same opinion still. And being in sales for a lot of years and helping people with something so basic as putting in a supply of food in the event that something would happen, or that they could maintain their freedom and independence notwithstanding whatever happened around them, I ended up learning quite a few things, and Babs and I have traded a lot of war stories over the years, and the issue of dependency is something that if people can be independent, if they can, no matter what happens around them, they can have control of their future and their destiny, it's the most comfortable feeling that they can possibly have. And the problem that we've got in our country right now, we've got a tremendous percentage of our population in denial of responsibility for what happens to them. And one of the subjects in talking about what we might discuss today that Babs likes really well is we deal with some of the issues when people call in on customer service and everything. We deal with people who are basically victims. It's not my fault. This happened to me, that happened to me, I've got some real problems. And what we're dealing with in our society a lot is the fact that people just don't take responsibility for what happens to them. We have created an approval-based society. In fact, a lot of times parents make the mistake of telling their children, you do what I say, or I won't approve of you, or I won't appreciate, I won't show you love. I think one of the most exasperating signboards that I've seen in the last little bit, but it exemplifies this. I won't explain what I feel about inoculations because I'm politically slightly to the right of Genghis Khan, and some of you can imagine what that is, but there's a baby up there making a face, and it says, no inoculations, no kiss. Well, what this little kid is doing is he's exemplifying exactly how we live in our society and in our families and our religions and virtually with government. Another billboard that just drives me absolutely nuts that touches on this idea of agency and freedom to choose and principles of liberty is when I see click it or ticket. That means that somebody is sitting there making an evaluation of me. If I don't connect up my seatbelt, then I'm going to get a ticket. Another one that just drives me absolutely nuts, and again, you're going to see how rebellious I am. I just, by the way, folks, those of you that saw me last week, I got a haircut. Now, I have to tell you that I wasn't able to get my haircut before the first program because I had gone, this is an aside, remember to get back to this, click it and take it and all this kind of stuff.
Okay.
But I've got an aside. I went to one of these self-improvement seminars, and it was really a great seminar. But at the end of the seminar, just before graduation, the lady that was running the thing just got crossways with me all of a sudden because she talked to everybody and said, "Now you want to come and you want to dress up for this graduation." And she picked another young fellow who's about 23 years old that had curly locks all the way down to his shoulders, and she picked me and she said, "Now you two guys need to get a haircut." And I said,
Were you in hair school?
No.
It's not a good thing.
Right. And it gets into this agency and freedom to choose and things. I've got a worse case of it than most people do, but I think that most all of you have that sense. And so I set a period of time during which I was not able to get a haircut because she told me to. And I've now passed that since the first.
You are stubborn.
Since the first show, and so now I got a haircut, so I'm a little bit more presentable, and you won't be embarrassed watching me. Okay, so that's the deal.
You need to show it off a little. Show off your hair.
Yes, there it is. I can do a Clinton pose.
It's Neil Diamond. That's who you look like.
Oh, okay.
Neil
Very
Diamond.
good. Okay, back to it.
Click on Facebook and see if you think he looks like. Say if you think he looks like Neil Diamond. Steve Shank, SHENK on Facebook.
There you go. Thank you. And the book is It's Not Your Fault. But let's get back to what we were talking about this approval thing.
And there's 2 minutes till break, so perfect.
2 minutes till break. Can I handle it? I think so. We live our lives based on assuming that we need other people's approval. But there was a great leader that a lot of folks recognize as being a great philosophical, religious leader earlier in the history of our country that had a lot of people gathering to him from all different countries, all ethnicities, and all different philosophies. And he was asked at one point in time, how do you govern this disparate bunch of people? And he said very simply, I teach them correct principles and they govern themselves. But the interesting thing is, what you're seeing is that when you teach someone a correct principle and they choose to be in compliance with that law or regulation, then it's a whole different ballgame than if you say, click it or ticket. It's the law. Come on. Think about it. Think about how you react. Now, the reason that we have a lot of victims in this country and a lot of people that really don't understand the idea of agency and freedom to choose and how important that is to us as human beings is that we're taught in so many ways that, notwithstanding this great leader that we had, many of the people that are still adherents to his principles and philosophies will also, in their families, as parents, say, hey, it's my home, you do as I say, or else. Now, this kid doesn't have a snowball's chance in understanding why he shouldn't end up in the back seat of a Chevy, or why he shouldn't get some booze going. And that's why the concept of allowing people to understand how things work is the most important means by which they can place themselves in accord with the eternal universal laws that just simply work, and as a result of being in accord with the laws that work, we reap the benefits that those laws bring. So that's what we're going to be talking about when we talk about It's Not Your Fault. A lot of the stuff that happens to us is not your fault unless you make it that way. So it's going to be kind of fun. So with that, I need to shut up and let Kim take over.
You're listening to It's Not Your Fault. We're on Primetime Health with Utah Valley Live and KHQN 1480 AM. We're going to be back with Steve Shank and Babs Rosberg right after this brief commercial break.
By focusing solely on the evaporative cooling industry, SwampTech has quickly become the experts. We bring our clients the latest technologies and offer only the highest quality parts. SwampTech has been servicing coolers since 1997 and has over 3,000 current clients. Why would you trust anyone else with your cooling needs? Call 801-471-0491. SwampTech's services include seasonal startup and shutdown, installation of a new evaporative cooling system, repair or replacement of your existing swamp cooler, and flex duct run for whole house distribution. Call us at 801-471-0491 or go to swamptech.net, SWAMPTECH.net. Summer's heat has arrived.
Have you ever realized that freedom is spelled F-O-O-D? Food. After air and water, food is our greatest dependency. Taking control of that dependency ensures personal power, independence, and freedom. We can't control earthquakes, storms, martial law, dollar crash inflation, the global warming hoax, farm and garden restrictive legislation, job loss, crop failures, or the 2012 planet disruptions. However, if we have our own food, none of these can control us. Hunger can never be used to control you if you never are forced to stand in a bread line because you do not have your own bread. It seems the only freedom we still have control of is possession of food. If we don't control our own food, events are rapidly moving to use food to control us. Freedom truly is spelled F-O-O-D. Contact efoodsdirect.com or call 800-409-5633. That's efoodsdirect.com or 800-409-5633.
And welcome back to It's Not Your Fault, right here on Primetime Health's weekly segment from 5 to 6 p.m. every day. Your host here is Steve Shank. He's here with his guest, Babs Rosberg, and they're talking about Steve's book, It's Not Your Fault.
Thank you, Kim. Before the break, we were talking about freedom to choose and how it really kind of aggravates most of us when we're told and it's demanded that we do something. Dependency is another interesting thing that we dealt with foods for a lot of years. We worked with a lot of families, a tremendous number of families. And the most important thing, no matter what happens with folks, if they can feed their families, we discovered that it resolves an awful lot of fear issues and concerns and problems that folks have. Because back to the concept that the extent to which you're dependent is the extent to which you've given power over yourself. That's why I brought up the idea of power over ourselves, the importance of our being able to make decisions and not have our lives based on what somebody tells us they approve of. Babs, we've worked with a lot of folks, and one of the things that we see in people making excuses for not being able to take care of their own circumstances is that we've got a saying around the office, and it's also in the book, It's Not Your Fault. There's a chapter that's called Victims Have Big Butts. And kind of go into that. That's one of your favorites because we deal with that all the time.
Well, we have customers that want to have a nice food supply that they have in their basement or in their pantry, but then they have all these reasons why they can't. And it comes, a lot of it's money, a lot of it's that they have other things that they think are more important, and they don't realize the peace of mind that they would derive if they had their food supply. They can always, other things are getting in the way.
And the fascinating thing, the things that I learned, that I put into the book, It's Not Your Fault, are as the result of watching families and seeing how they deal with something so basic as their greatest dependency.
they a lot of times would look at a disaster that had occurred, and they'd say, oh my gosh, I really need to do something so that never happens to me. Or the situation with Japan that happened a bit ago, where an entire nation was decimated with the tsunami and the earthquake and everything. And people from that said, oh, we've got to do something. Then after they quiet down, after things settle down a couple weeks later, if the dog ain't biting me, then dogs don't bite. You know?
We see that all the time. If there's a flood in some area, say a flood in Pennsylvania, people get really excited about it. But then a week later, nobody is thinking anymore about it because it's over with, and it didn't happen to me, so I'm safe. Whether it's a flood, a hurricane, a tornado, whatever happens, people just go back to where they were after it's over with.
And that's basically how victims are created. Because when something did happen to them, if something did happen to them, what would they say? They say, well, I'd have been okay if the government had gotten here and taken care of me soon enough, but I had to go into that gathering center. I would have been perfectly happy to put in a supply of food and take care of my family if I could have made enough money, but I didn't get a raise, and so it cost me so much for all my payments. I've got to pay on my car and my boat, and I've got to pay for $150 worth of television programming and all of these things that are really important. But food, for crying out loud, they just don't take care of me well enough. So here's a victim. I woulda, coulda, shoulda, but, and there's the but that goes with victims. So we're not speaking disparagingly, but now on the other hand, we find that this victimization, this lack of taking responsibility for our lives, is actually taught to us by our society. Let me give you a perfect example of approval thinking. It's really fascinating. For those of you that are familiar with some of the concepts like unconditional love, okay? That's love without conditions. Very few people are capable of doing it because so many of them are very judgmental. I will approve of you unconditionally if you meet my standards and think the way I think. I tend to be that way quite a bit. But anyway, we don't want to talk about that. We're talking about those guys, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay. So anyway, so approval is taught to us. That little kid on the signboard that says, no inoculation, no kiss. That's the way we think. We as parents say, hey, teenager, you live by these guidelines. We don't teach them why if you go out and get drunk, you feel crappy. It wipes out X number of brain cells, and you don't have that many to lose to begin with, and that type of thing. We don't teach them the correct principles like that great leader taught, but we expect them to be obedient to the law. Well, I think obedience is one of the most disgusting words in the history of mankind, because it says, look, dummy, you can't think for yourself. It's the perfect liberal agenda. Like I say, I'm a conservative, okay? It's the perfect liberal agenda. And for those that are familiar with it, it says something like this. See if some of you recognize this concept. You do what I say. You don't have to worry about getting blessings and stuff. Just do what I say and I'll take care of you. Okay? That is basically approval-based. Now let's go to something that happens in our society that actually aggravates the daylights out of me. And I know that I'm going to aggravate some of you folks out there, and you're going to think I'm a real jerk, but that's okay. I can live with it. That's me. I am a real jerk. But have you ever seen some of these little girl beauty contests? Okay. Now I'm going to talk about how approval is really dangerous, approval living, because it takes responsibility for your life and how you feel about yourself outside of yourself. And this is what causes our young girls, for seeking approval, to do all sorts of things that we'd rather not have them have just to be approved of. But let's go back to the baby beauty contests. They doll these little girls up, and what did they sense from their parents? Now you walk, little Melba, you walk just this way, and you smile just this way, and you primp just this way, and you sing just this way. And if you don't do it the way I tell you to, and the judge doesn't approve of you, then I'm going to be mad at you because I told you. You see, but does that happen? I hope that I didn't hurt your ears. But anyway, but that's the way people function. They think that the way to have success is to force somebody to do something. And so these little girls grow up to be teenagers, and what have they heard? They've heard, you must be pretty, you must act in certain
Skinny.
ways. You must be bulimic. And you must seek others' approvals. And so you have what they refer to as the airheads, that go around, and they're pretty, and they look just right, and they like the boys, and they primp, and they smile, and they're narcissistic. And what do you got? You've got an approval-based person that sees no value in themselves and see only value if they can be approved by somebody. And if they're not getting the approval, they work harder and harder and harder and harder to get it. But yet, what have we got? We've got a situation where the victim says, I would have cut but the government. I would have but the school. I would have but my parents. I would have but all of this approval-based stuff really destroys the self-image. We have an entire generation right now that has poorer self-image than any other generation before just because of something else. Now, again, some people are going to get offended by what I'm going to say, but let me talk about Facebook. Let me talk about video games. Let me talk about cell phones. We have young people that have a list of 500 friends on Facebook, but they don't know how to relate to each other as real friends. One of the things that drives me nuts, and you didn't tell me to lower my voice. You were supposed to tap. She was supposed to tap me on the knee and say, when I get up into these higher registers, I lose the baritone that everybody likes to hear me talk. I'm sorry, I can't resist. Sometimes it's just pressure. The pressure builds up, and you get in the way of releasing it. And you're giving me this two thing. That means I got to shut up for a commercial break. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I just have a question, and indeed we do have a commercial break coming up. But as this relates to what you're sharing about victims have the big butts, right?
Right.
They're saying, but this, but that. Is that something that's covered in your book?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, good.
I have an entire chapter that's entitled Victims Have Big Butts.
I love that premise, and it really gave me pause to think about how many times I actually become the victim and use the butt, I think those who are reading the book, it would be fabulous to find out. It's coming out this summer.
Yes,
And
late summer.
Late summer. It's called It's Not Your Fault. And if you want to just, before we get a commercial break, if you just want to take a peek at the cover, you can go to your blog, which is steveshank.me, and find out about that. Now, after we get back from the break, we're going to talk a little bit more with Steve and Babs about Steve's book, and as well eFoods Direct, who are the sponsors of this program and have a wonderful solution for families who want to sit at the table, have their dinner, and be prepared for those things that happen all over the world, and everything from job loss to tornadoes, heaven forbid, right?
Heaven forbid.
All right, we're going to be back with more of It's Not Your Fault on Primetime Health after this.
Folks, have you ever realized that freedom is spelled F-O-O-D? Food. After air and water, food is our greatest dependency. Taking control of that dependency ensures personal power, independence, and freedom. We can't control earthquakes, storms, martial law, dollar crash inflation, the global warming hoax, farm and garden restrictive legislation, job loss, crop failures, or the 2012 planet disruptions. However, if we have our own food, none of these can control us. Hunger can never be used to control you if you never are forced to stand in a bread line because you do not have your own bread. It seems the only freedom we still have control of is possession of food. If we don't control our own food, events are rapidly moving to use food to control us. Freedom truly is spelled F-O-O-D. Contact efoodsdirect.com or call 800-409-5633. That's efoodsdirect.com or 800-409-5633.
Hi, I'm Roger Strong. I'm here to tell you about Tidbits of Utah County. No death, divorce, devastation, or destruction, just good news for good people. You'll find us everywhere in Utah Valley, in doctors' offices, restaurants, mechanic shops, anywhere that people wait. We have over 35 features of fun, family-friendly entertainment. To find a paper or to advertise, call Roger at 801-616-6288. Again, that's Roger at 801-616-6288, or Tidbits of Utah County, the happy paper for Happy Valley.
Are you an athlete looking for a natural boost to your workout? Have you studied up on the benefits of nitric oxide production to your performance? Then you'll want to try Kyani's Nitro Extreme. Nitro Extreme promotes cardiovascular health and improved blood flow, supports muscle contraction and relaxation, as well as nerve transmission. I use Nitro Extreme right before I lift weights, and I've never been stronger in my entire life. If you don't try Nitro Extreme, you'll never know what you're missing. Call 801-362-9552 to order yours today. That's 801-362-9552.
Welcome back to It's Not Your Fault, hosted by Steve Shank, right here on Utah Valley Live and KHQN 1480 AM. We're here with Steve Shank, who's the host of this show. He's talking about his book, It's Not Your Fault, and we're with his guest, Babs Rosberg. They're both the founders of eFoods Direct Global and Go Foods Global, and they're talking about dependency and food. And right before the break, we were talking about how people aren't relating to each other because of the electronic interference.
Well, what happens is we have young folks that get on Facebook and they have 500 friends, but they really don't have friends, because what happens is we deal with this. I just get absolutely beside myself, and Babs can tell you how I'd react to, how do I react to emails that we have from one office to the other at the company?
Right, when the office doors are just adjacent to each other, and send an email rather than go over and really have the whole discussion, not one part and then the other part, and someone's not back to their desk for another hour, and something that could be said in 5 minutes stretches out for half a day.
Yeah, and the thing that really gets you is when they're calling in, or when they would normally call in and say, hey, I'm a little bit sick today, I need to take a day off, they email you.
Right, because you don't know what that cough really means, do you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they can't cough over the email. And basically what I'm finding is that in negotiations and in relationships within a business where you have to communicate, here's the deal, guys. 7% of communication is the words that you use. All of the rest, like 58%, is body language, and another 20% or something like that is the tone of the voice and the inflections and things and the attitudes. 7%. So what we're doing is our society is drilling down and ending up with only 7% of the communication. And somebody says, I like your Facebook. Okay, how well do you like it? How much do you like it? Will you support it? Will you do anything with it? What does that mean? Does that mean you're a friend? You're my bosom buddy for the rest of my life, and if I'm in a firefight, you're going to back me up and shoot the guy that's going to nail me in the back of the head? I don't know what it means. What's a friend? What's a friend? I like your website. I like your Facebook. I like... okay, it's getting to the point where young people that are looking for jobs a lot of times are, if it's the first job, they're going to be looked at very, very carefully, and they aren't sent to some, they aren't accepted for some positions until they have proven that they can actually hold a job and relate to people for a period of time before they'd even be considered in some companies to work. And that's where we are. So what I'm trying to say is you take the lack of communication, you take the fact that we are not relating to each other as individuals, and then add to it the approval base that we've got. Remember that little girl that has to act just so, and then when she becomes a teenager, she acts just so. And the fact is that we have everyone conditioned to look over their shoulder to see who's looking and to see what fits and what doesn't. Babs, you and I deal with it, with people actually being concerned about providing for their family, and still they're living the good life, looking good and sounding good, but not really being good, and they're making their boat payment for $500 a month because that is keeping up with the Joneses and the lifestyle to which they would like to become accustomed. But I'm living in a relatively upscale neighborhood, as you are. One of the things that we discovered was that there are some welfare programs and support programs available. A lot of folks here are members of the LDS church, and they have their support programs. I was talking to one of the church leaders the other day about my particular neighborhood, and he said, you would be absolutely amazed. The economy is nowhere near what we think it is. You would be amazed that about 50% of your neighborhood and my neighborhood are needing help with their food budget.
Everybody's so overextended on everything else.
That's right. Because, you see, in order to have approval of themselves, that little girl is dressed up in that little foo-foo dress and with the lipstick and the eye gloss and all this kind of crap. That little girl is being taught that it's not important who she is or what she can do and what a magnificent human being she is. She's being taught that none of that matters. And then that commutes to people in the family situation where, well, it doesn't matter that you have a house that's paid for or that you can afford. It matters only how good you look and whether you have a wider driveway and a 4-car garage, and whether you are able to afford a swimming pool, and whether you can go on a cruise. I actually had a family one time when I was, I've had a whole bunch of them, but the one that I remember that was just absolutely weird. This guy was a doctor, okay? He came down and introduced himself as, I'm Dr. So-and-so. And I said, hi, Fred, how you doing? You know, but I'm sorry, doctors. But I don't need health care right now, thank goodness, because I'd be in trouble if I walked in and met one of those doctors. Never mind. But anyway, they had, his wife was absolutely determined that they really needed. They were out in California. They were in one of the earthquake areas. They had experienced some problems with the San Francisco earthquake. Okay, this was some time ago. But anyway, and she was saying, we've just got to have something in case there's a disaster or something so we can take care of the family. And he, in all of his arrogance, said, we really can't afford this right now.
Oh, doctor.
Really, and the house they were living in was, phenomenal. And in the conversation, as I politely removed myself from the situation because there's no sense in talking to him any further, I found out that he had planned a cruise for he and two of their children that was going to cost significantly more than what it would have taken to put in a whole year's supply of food for that family. When his wife, now, if both of them were in accord, I got no problem with that. But his wife was deeply concerned about preparation and being in a situation where they could take care of their family no matter what.
Well, she was the one that has to do the cooking, and she's the one that would have to go get the groceries. And if there's no way to get the groceries, that's all falling on her. So she was feeling that a lot more than he was.
So what does that teach the children? Okay, let's get back to the principle of approval. Is who you are and what you stand for. You know, they say there's another principle that my daddy used to talk about, and it's a very simple one. It says, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. Mm-hmm. And now, I know that's not my dad's thing because both of you are nodding your head and all the folks out there have heard that before. But it's really true. If you don't stand for who you are, then someone else's approval will determine how you live. This guy was so caught up in having the good life and doing all the stuff that he didn't take care of the basic needs.
He was just a follower of his other doctor friends, right?
Yeah. He's got to look better than the other doctors. Well, at a certain point, who cares? Who cares?
When you're
What's
hungry.
important? But one of the most important things that I learned, I take a lot of these self-improvement things, as the two of you that know me know that I need a lot of self-improvement, so I take a lot of these courses, stuff like this. I need all the help I can get. But one of the most fascinating concepts that I learned from this one, I don't remember much of the others, because the only thing that you learn is what you need at the time, because of the 2x4 you just got hit with in the forehead. But anyway, one of the most important principles was when you get all tied up about shoulds and coulds and want-tos and all this kind of stuff, the most important thing to remember is to be able to sit back and say, his terminology, mine would be different, I don't give a hoot. I don't give a hoot. It's okay. Who am I? What do I stand for? Do I stand for who I am, what I can do, and do I believe that I have total control over my destiny by deciding what I will do, and in deciding I create my future, and by not undeciding later on, I don't uncreate it, so whatever I decide I can accomplish, and I don't need to accomplish for the approval of someone else. Mm-hmm. I don't need to be particularly good looking or cut my hair for the approval of somebody else. If I like who I am, then you will be able to like yourself when you're around me. So one of the last principles that goes along with this is, if you can say about yourself and about me, if you can say, I like me best when I'm with Steve Shank. I like me best when I'm with Steve Shank. And if I can say, I like me best when I'm with Kim and Babs, then that's our objective. And this next segment, we're going to talk about that a little bit. Might be useful.
We'll be right back after this.
Folks, have you ever realized that freedom is spelled F-O-O-D? Food. After air and water, food is our greatest dependency. Taking control of that dependency ensures personal power, independence, and freedom. We can't control earthquakes, storms, martial law, dollar crash inflation, the global warming hoax, farm and garden restrictive legislation, job loss, crop failures, or the 2012 planet disruptions. However, if we have our own food, none of these can control us. Hunger can never be used to control you if you never are forced to stand in a bread line because you do not have your own bread. It seems the only freedom we still have control of is possession of food. If we don't control our own food, events are rapidly moving to use food to control us. Freedom truly is spelled F-O-O-D. Contact efoodsdirect.com or call 800-409-5633. That's efoodsdirect.com or 800-409-5633.
By focusing solely on the evaporative cooling industry, SwampTech has quickly become the experts. We bring our clients the latest technologies and offer only the highest quality parts. SwampTech has been servicing coolers since 1997 and has over 3,000 current clients. Why would you trust anyone else with your cooling needs? Call 801-471-0491. SwampTech's services include seasonal startup and shutdown, installation of a new evaporative cooling system, repair or replacement of your existing swamp cooler, and flex duct run for whole house distribution. Call us at 801-471-0491 or go to swamptech.net, SWAMPTECH.net. Summer's heat has arrived. Don't spend another sleepless night because you're too hot. Call today for an appointment, 801-471-0491.
Welcome back to It's Not Your Fault, hosted by Steve Shank with his guest here, Babs Rosberg. The sponsor of the show is eFoods Direct, and we've been talking about Steve's book, It's Not Your Fault. I'm curious to know a little bit about the sponsor. This show will be on every single Tuesday, 5 to 6 Mountain Time, right here on Primetime Health, on Utah Valley Live and KHQN 1480 AM. Tell us a little bit about this food and about the book and what we can expect each week.
Well, basically, the food is the result of having a lot of years working with families with food, the most basic dependency, and that's where a lot of the principles from the book were developed. But right now we're in a situation where we mentioned earlier that some of the neighborhoods were in trouble, but some of the statistics from the government are very simple. Half of our country, half the population of our country right now needs assistance in acquiring food for their families every day. 14 million American children are going to bed hungry every night. We have families that are living in tent cities, and we have a situation economically and with regard to our entire nation that is worse than the conditions in the Great Depression. Unfortunately, we don't see that much of it, but we hear about it when we're talking to families. So what we've done with the company, and this is off subject a little bit, but it is our sponsor, and so I'll tell you a little bit about that, and I want to have Babs, who was instrumental in developing a means by which people can get started with putting in a supply of food and eating the food that is available, that is the best food on the planet, and also is half the cost of anything else you can do. Babs, would you cover that with the folks?
Right. This is our new planning pack that we've just come out. It's just off the press. And in this, you can go to our website, efoodsdirect.com, and order one of these. And inside it has a lot of good things to know about the food, how to plan how much you need.
We'll set it up in front of the mic there.
Okay, and then in this planning pack are also 3 of our meals. I'll just take one out. This one is cheesy chicken and rice casserole. It's one of my very, very favorites. These are easy to fix. You can have a meal in 15 minutes. All the foods are very nutritious. There's no hydrogenated oil, no added MSG. We have some gluten-free meals, some soy-free meals. So there's something there for everyone. And we're excited about our new pack that is just in now that will give you lots of ideas, will give you lots of help. And so we encourage you to go on our website.
Well, the thing over here that we've got is this tells you how to use some of the meals that we've given you for samples. And then there's a planning portion of it. And like Babs was saying, if you go on the website, it'll tell you all about this. But there's also a CD that we recorded that gives you a whole lot of information, just the stuff that you need to know about food in this period of time in the history of the human race. It's
right. It talks about planning and preparation, the affordability of it, the quality of the food. So, and that you can just plug into your car when you're driving on your commute and not have to spend any time extra.
and you can listen to Steve Shank drone on and on and on with everything that we think you ought to know. So it's fun. That's great. Thanks, Babs. Anyway, remember I said earlier that when we came back, we're going to talk about the principle called I like me best when I'm with you. The approval-based society. If we can help each other as much as we can, not seek approval of each other, but be confident and like ourselves as individuals. So the way that we do that is in any relationship, husbands and wives, parents and children, children and children, and in our business relationships. If we can be blind to the faults that we see in others, and if we can help them to see their beauty, their value, their magnificence, that will enable them to feel best about themselves when they're with us. And the best example that I have is in courtship. The guy combs his hair, wears deodorant, brushes his teeth, does all the things to look really good to the little gal. But then what does he do? He's not thinking about himself and how narcissistic he may become if he's a good-looking bugger, if he's a good guy. But he looks at that woman and he says, oh my goodness. And he sees no faults. He only sees the beauty, the things that he likes about her. And I keep hoping that Babs will look at me this way, but it's still a struggle after 30 years or something like that. But the fact is that the way that I make Babs feel about herself when she's with me is the way that those guys out there made their wife, their girlfriend, feel when they were dating. But then the problem comes about a year later when we're sitting there in our wife beater, T-shirt that's stained all over the front, half shaven, not like these sexy guys that you guys like the shaving on, but and we aren't doing any of the things that we did when we courted that girl, and then we wonder why 50% of the marriages go in the toy. Okay, folks, as we go through this, I hope that by the time we talk for several of these meetings, that you will be able to say about yourselves that you like yourself best when you're with us. Because I know that we're going to be able to say, I like me best when I'm with you.